So Photoshop for iOS was a very anticipated app since its initial announcement in 2018.
How great would it be to have Photoshop available anywhere inspiration strikes you? Real Photoshop beyond the desktop.
And they set a release date for 2019, they did ship it, and I drew these drawings with Photoshop for iOS. So why all the backlash? Well, first off, it was extremely difficult to do these pieces. I spent more time and a lot more effort than I would have on the desktop.
Real Photoshop beyond the desktop.
So I think the first major problem was that Adobe pitched this as Photoshop on the go, exactly what you get on the desktop because it's built with the same code. This just created an expectation that is not very easy to meet. I mean, you're taking Photoshop, which is a great program that people have used for over 25 years since its inception, and trying to make a new app with a new language. It's not mouse and keyboard, it's now Apple Pencil and touch. Everybody wants their favorite apps on the iPad. That's why I go through so much trouble to try to get Paint Tool SI on the iPad. It's why I was so happy when Clip Studio came out on the iPad exactly like the desktop software, because the iPad is just so much more of a friendly environment. It's very inviting, and it lets you create without any friction. So for creative professionals and hobbyists that use Photoshop as their main creative tool, it was a big deal that Adobe had announced Photoshop for the iPad. But I think all of this tends to culminate into a lot of hype for a certain product, whether it's games or an app, and it's just very difficult for anybody to try to meet that expectation. But I think it comes from a big lineage of greatness with Photoshop. So many different artists over the years have used Photoshop as their main tool, whether you're an animator, illustrator, designer, you name it. And it's a tough task to please everyone. Originally it's a photo manipulation software, but now tons of other artists use it, and it's difficult to meet everyone's needs. I don't want to be an apologist for Adobe, but I do think that there's potential in the iOS version of Photoshop. I drew some pieces I personally enjoy very much, and it was a pleasure to use when it was working for me, but then when that resistance hit, it's just too much and I wanted to get away from it. To the point where I did have to finish some of these drawings on either the desktop version of Photoshop or some other app. But because the app is built around real Photoshop code, I think there is a potential to, over the years, see this app improve and really get to somewhere that's close to the desktop version of Photoshop. I think many people don't try the first version of an app, and different software really have different iterations that culminate in a product that a lot of people end up using. I think it's very easy to take the Photoshop app for iOS and compare it to like Procreate and Clip Studio, but a lot of people never use the original iteration of either of those. If you look back at the first version of Procreate, or if you look back at the Lust Studio that Clip Studio made before Clip Studio, they're different apps, they're a lot simpler, and they've improved on them greatly over time. Creating apps is very challenging, and taking an app that's so loved and so dense and just feature-rich like Photoshop, completely redesigning it and putting it on an iPad that has a different language, is just tough. So there's going to be some growing pains in the meantime. I can see a lot of parallels to the disappointment in Photoshop to like the games industry, where an expectation is set not only in release date but also features and performance and what you can do with it. And maybe Adobe had overpromised or set a release date too early. I'm not really sure, but I do see potential in this app, and I like to try to stay on the positive side of things. That being said, I'm not using Photoshop for iOS right now. I still find it too difficult. It causes me too much frustration, and there's too much friction in using the app. Sometimes when I want to do something, it just doesn't work the way that it should, or it's not as intuitive as I think it should be. But like I said, with time, who knows? I remember when Adobe had released several other Photoshop-alike apps that had similar features to Photoshop but were not full Photoshop, and this is kind of somewhere in between Photoshop on the desktop and those older apps. And it just makes me think, if Adobe had marketed this closer to like Premiere Rush, if it was like Photoshop Rush, where you could take the projects you have on the go, or if you think of something while you're not at your desk, you can quickly jot it down, make a sketch of it, and easily take that onto the desktop, maybe it would be more successful. But maybe, just maybe, if you give it enough time, this app could be much greater than that, and it could be a lot closer to the desktop version of Photoshop. I'm Skippen, and I hope you like this video essay style format. I think it was a good way to talk about Photoshop in a different light than most people, but for now I want to move on to different projects, talk about different apps and different hardware that I've been using. So if you're looking forward to stuff like that, please subscribe, share the videos, put notifications on, whatever you want to do, because I have a lot more to offer and I hope you'll stick around. Thanks for watching.